can actually share this webinar with you as well. I'll send you a link. So if you wanted to refer back to it or share the information with your catechists, you can do that as well.
Okay, great.
So I'll send you an email in a day or two once we have that ready. So at this point, you should be seeing a blue screen. It says Spirit of Truth Curriculum. Can you see that?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'd like to just start really by welcoming you to the Sophia Institute family. We're super excited that you're using the Spirit of Truth Curriculum. And I really just want to emphasize ultimately that we'd like today to be the beginning of our relationship and an ongoing relationship. It's not, we really don't want this to be like a one and done thing and the first time and only time that we ever talk to each other.
Okay.
Yeah, we really want to, when I say we welcome you to our family, we kind of really promote that idea that we are a family, that we're truly collaborating, and that we want to journey with you and really support you as long as you're using our textbooks. And we'll support you really in any way that we're capable of doing. So I told you a little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Curriculum for Sophia Institute for Teachers. I formerly taught high school theology, and I've been with Sophia Institute since 2015. And really, from the very beginning, my main project was the Spirit of Truth curriculum. So I wrote many of the lessons myself that you find in the curriculum. I worked with teacher authors and catechist authors from around the country to write the rest, and edited their material and kind of put it together into the first version. And then we kind of evolved that into the Parish edition that you're going to be looking at, or that you have. Do you have those in hand right now? Have you received those texts yet?
Thank you for creating that, by the way, because
yes,
because the bigger books were so daunting to carry around, you know, and
sure.
For school, and so these are smaller. So I have these, the second grade.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I'm glad you have them. And those have gone through a bit of a redesign and revision from obviously what you had last year in the school edition. And I think they're much more user-friendly for DREs and catechists in a parish setting.
Right.
So we're really excited to have those out there this fall. So to encourage you to reach out to us if you need support, if you have questions, concerns, comments. If you don't have it already, here's my email address. Please write it down. It is mgutzwiller@sophiainstitute.com. That's MGUTZWILLER. And like I said, I'd really like to make myself available to you for anything that you need. Questions, concerns, comments. We really like to hear feedback. We're pretty agile, so if you do have a good piece of feedback that we can reasonably do and turn around to share with everybody else around the country using the curriculum, we'll try to make that happen quickly and put it up on our website or send something out. I like to hear success stories as well. So if you and your catechist do a really great arts and crafts, and you take a picture of it, send it to me. We might share it in a newsletter or something. I just like to hear those good stories, you know. A lot of times, the only time you ever contact your textbook publisher is if there's something wrong and you want to complain. Right. So I want to hear the good things too.
Okay.
So don't be a stranger, and don't be surprised if, like, you know, in October, I pick up the phone and just give you a call and say, hey, how's it going?
Okay.
You know, we'd like to let you know that we're here and remind you that we're here to support you over the course of the year. Okay?
That's great. Okay. I have one comment. Do you want
yes.
it already? I liked, actually, the teacher's guide is so big for the whole school, but
okay.
it had the binder ring around it. And the Parish edition doesn't. I find the binder ring easier so that you're just holding one piece of paper while you're reading the lesson. You don't have to hold the whole book open.
Okay.
That's just one little thing.
That's good feedback. I'll pass that on.
Okay.
There's obviously not a lot we can do about that now.
Right, but in the future.
Yeah, perhaps for a second printing or something, that might be something we could easily do. So thank you. I'll pass that feedback on. So what I have prepared for you today, the goal of our time together is just to familiarize you more with the approach of the Spirit of Truth series. But it sounds like you've got a pretty good handle on it already. But I'll cover some things. I'll try to go pretty quickly through the nuts and bolts since you're pretty familiar with it already, and just emphasize some key things that I think are probably the most important to know. We'll begin by doing sort of a 40,000-foot view of Spirit of Truth, why it's different, some of the broad kind of thinking behind the curriculum. we'll dive into the nuts and bolts and look at a session plan and how to use a session plan. And then I'm going to jump into our website, which is brand new. Literally, it was put up and live maybe 3 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yes. So brand new website with a whole bunch of online resources for you and your catechists. I'll jump live into that and show you exactly what that looks like. And then at the end, I'll pause for Q&A, but especially since it's just the two of us, feel free to just stop me and ask questions as we go.
Okay.
That probably would work better for both of us. So I'm not easily offended. So just stop me, shout if you have a question. I'm happy to pause and address it in real time. Okay.
Okay, great.
All righty. Did you receive a welcome email with a link to any of these videos yet?
I received it yesterday afternoon, so I
Okay.
did not have time to look at it yet.
Okay.
But I was excited in the welcome video that you're having. Things to send home with the parents.
Yes.
Which wasn't available last year, right? And saint cards, and so I'm really interested about all that.
Right. Yep. And that's all the stuff that's available on our website. So at the end, I'll jump into that and I'll show you all of those different features. But yes, those take-home things are brand new this year. So these videos, write this link down. You already have it in your email, I guess, sophiaonline.org/parish videos. We are assembling a series of orientation videos. They're all pretty short, between 2 and 5 minutes or so in length. And these videos are really meant for you to be able to share directly with your team of catechists, okay? To make your job of orientating them easier. What I'd probably encourage you to do is to ask them to watch these videos before your orientation on the 7th, you said it was?
The 8th.
The 8th. Okay, I was close.
Very good.
So I'd share the link with them before that and ask them to watch them. Again, they're short little videos, so they don't have to watch them all in one sitting. They can watch 1 or 2 at a time and come back tomorrow and watch the next couple. We currently only have 4 of the videos available. There's only 4 ready. We're going to be adding more as they're made available. You'll actually recognize the narrator. It's me, the voice.
Oh, great.
So I'm making the videos myself, but I'm also doing a lot of these live webinars at the moment, so it's kind of slowed down in the process of making them. But as soon as as they're ready, we put them right up on the website, so they'll all be available to you. They're going to cover a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today, but even more in depth. Okay. So great resource for you to share with your catechists. I'll also point this out too. This is another great resource to refer your catechist to, and that's the Quick Start Guide in the beginning of the catechist's guide. It's in the first couple of pages in the book, the Roman numeral pages. And this Quick Start Guide, a lot of the information covered by the video series and that I'll touch on today is in this Quick Start Guide in print form. So you can actually have your catechist read that as well. It's a great complement to the videos, a great complement to what you'll be covering in your own orientation with them. Okay. Yeah, and if you have that teacher's guide, it might be good if you just have that in front of you, and we can flip through it as we go through the different features. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Spirit of Truth, as I'm sure you've seen at this point, is a session plan-based format. We really think that's what makes this approach unique and different from most other religious education textbooks and school textbooks, for that matter, that are available out there, is that full session plan-based format. So we've given you complete directions that you can follow from start to finish to present a full session. You can follow them exactly as we presented, or you can adapt them to your own teaching style, your own context, your own group of students, whatever works best for you. What that practically translates in these new books that you have are 32 to 33 weekly sessions. So we've envisioned a 32 to 33 week program. That might vary from parish to parish. How many weeks do you have roughly?
We have 24.
24.
And then we try to keep a couple for like different, doing their own thing.
Sure.
So I wondered which ones we should cut out or...
Well, you're in luck because we put together a resource for you on the website that'll help you figure that out. A kind of an essential sessions sort of guide. I'll show you that when we get into the website, but it'll tell you if you have a program that is this many weeks, do these lessons instead.
Okay.
So I'll show you that at the end. And each of those sessions then we've written to be, if you do everything in the session, which you don't have to do everything, but if you do everything in the session, it would take approximately 90 minutes, okay?
Right, and we only have 1 hour.
Okay.
So last year when I did it, and I love how you say exactly what to do, because I had to substitute a class that I wasn't prepared for. It's spur of the moment. And I just followed the catechist guide, which was great. Not ideal for sure, but it tells you like exactly what to say, and it takes away a lot of the work from the catechist of how to work that day. But I also want them to shine in their own way and use their own gifts and talents.
Sure, exactly.
So we do have to cut out 30 minutes. So I'm just going to tell them to just choose one activity, the one that they relate to the most or think they're kids, because they'll know their kids, right?
Perfect. Yep.
Relate to.
Yep. And then some weeks too, you could choose the activities for them if it's a particular session that you think is important, or, as you're reviewing it. So they can choose, or you can choose for them, or some combination of the two, whatever you'd like.
Right.
I'll show you what that looks like in a second. You've obviously flipped through the books, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here. All of our sessions are rooted in Scripture and the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So you can really be confident that what's presented in these guides is the authentic teaching of the Catholic Church.
Why I love it. Yep.
Yep. You'd think that's a no-brainer, but it's surprisingly challenging to come by. All of our material is also written by current or former catechists and teachers, and has been tested by catechists and teachers. So you know that the strategies you're encountering really come from a place of experience as well. We use sacred art. You kind of mentioned that earlier when we were chatting, that you like using the sacred art, which is awesome. I love to hear that. And really the idea behind the sacred art, it's a powerful teaching tool, not just to teach, but also as a means of evangelization, right? Because God is truth and beauty and goodness themselves. He is those things. And so when we introduce our students to something that is beautiful, and we ask them to contemplate something that is beautiful, they're not just contemplating that painting, they're contemplating God himself, right, who is beauty. And so it's a different and powerful way to put students into contact with God. And obviously you've seen the fruits of that already. And hopefully,
I already mentioned that, like, we've reflected on a piece of artwork in our first communion class, and then for a couple of minutes, and we started the conversation, and I realized what they didn't know, and so it brought our class into a different area, but it was very important.
Right.
And then also I use this for teaching baptism to older kids. I have their whole family in, and it kind of just set a more sacred tone for the whole meeting, because they were just in awe over the beautiful artwork.
Right.
It drew the parents in as well.
So, right. Yeah. I mean, and we're such a visual kind of culture these days, our media savviness. So to put that kind of beautiful imagery in front of our eyes, you're right. It sets a very different tone than if you were just talking at them, or, put some catechism passages on the board and left it at that, something like that. So I'm glad you've had good success with that. And we hope that you continue to, and your catechist will as well. We've given you background essays throughout the curriculum as well. So every unit begins with a background essay to help form you and your catechists in that authentic teaching. And then we provide ongoing support throughout. I'll highlight how exactly we do that here in a couple of slides. But there's some features throughout that are really directed at the catechist to be able to give them the words and the foundation to speak accurately about the content of our faith.
Okay, great.
We're, of course, focused on both head and heart knowledge, which obviously knowing a list of facts about Jesus is different than actually knowing Jesus and being in relationship with him.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously. And so I think a lot of religion textbooks stop at that list of facts without actually trying to extend a meaningful invitation to relationship with Jesus. And so we want to focus on both, right? That list of facts is important, but it's important in as much as it leads to a relationship with Jesus, that heart knowledge. So we really hopefully have designed this curriculum to be able to facilitate the growth of both head and heart knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Let's look at the nuts and bolts of a lesson here. Every session begins with an overview page. If you have your catechist guide in front of you, you can just turn to the first one, or whatever. You can just pick a session. It doesn't matter. They all look pretty similar.
I'm the same one as you. Okay.
Yeah, this comes from our second grade one, actually. So,
which is the one I have.
Perfect. And so what you find on the overview page, first of all, is a list of what your students are going to learn this week. So that's a simple kind of couple of bullet point statements of what students at the end of the session could reasonably be expected to know or articulate in some way.
Okay.
And then there's a list of what students are going to do over the course of the session. So kind of a list, just a short summary of what students are going to be doing. You turn the page from the overview. You're going to find the session at a glance page.
Okay.
And here you're going to see a list of what you're going to need for the session. So at the top is a list of the student workbook pages that students are going to be working on over the course of the lesson. The next box down is a list of any materials that you're going to need to gather over the course of the lesson. Specifically, often it's going to tell you if you're going to need craft supplies of some kind, crayons, markers, paper, whatever it might be.
Okay.
There's a list of vocabulary underneath that. And a word about the vocabulary here. These definitions are meant for you and your catechists.
Okay.
So they're written at something of an adult level.
Okay.
The definitions here aren't necessarily intended to be used word for word with students, particularly in the younger grades. But they're more meant to give you and your catechists the knowledge about these vocabulary terms to be able to speak knowledgeably about them.
Okay.
And then at the bottom, there.
One of the concerns last year, actually,
Okay.
they said it was a little above the second grade level.
Okay.
People were worried about that. So what you're saying is the second graders don't need to necessarily worry about all these words.
Well, I do have I will say something about vocabulary in a little bit here. We do think that, like, obviously our vocabulary as Catholics is a little challenging, right? We use big words, we use funny words, we use words in a different way than we might normally use them outside of Catholic settings. However, those words are often very important, I think, for kids to be exposed to, and even if they're not using them in everyday conversation, right? I wouldn't expect like a second grader to drop the word concupiscence, for example, in an everyday conversation.
Right.
But I also think it's valuable for them to have seen that word before and to have had an adult tell them what that is, you know? The challenge then becomes sometimes when the adults don't know those words,
Right.
you know, and that's ultimately a failure in, you know, decades of catechesis in our country, and it's unfortunate. So what we're trying to fill that gap a little bit. Like, we do want students, even at young ages, to be exposed to these key words of our faith, but we don't expect them to be like using them in everyday language and everyday conversation. If I had $1 for every time, when I taught high school, if I had $1 for every time I had a kid come to me in class and say that they'd never heard of a particular concept or word, like, I mean, particularly purgatory was one that came up frequently, that my students had never heard of purgatory before.
I believe it. I'd never heard of it until I went to college, and I went to Catholic school all my life.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge failing of catechesis, right? And so I don't necessarily expect a second grader to fully understand purgatory, but I do want them to know that that's a thing, you know? Right. And so when they hear it again, it's not for the first time. Okay. So that's kind of our rationale behind vocabulary.
That makes sense.
Okay. So that's our session at a glance. Every session then, as I mentioned before, is approximately 90 minutes in length. And each session then includes a suggested warm-up. So there's if you turn the page or you're following along in the teacher's guide you turn the page from the session at the glance, you see the beginning of the lesson, and it shows you the suggested warm-up, and then there's a series of several activities to choose from.
Right.
And each of those activities we've kind of thumbnailed out as about 10 to 20 minutes in length. Okay. The warm-ups look something like this. So every session begins with a warm-up. And really, we suggest do the warm-up every time, right? There's one warm-up for each lesson. Start your session with the warm-up each time. And then you can choose from any of the activities. So here I have on screen a selection of, there's 3 different activities for this particular lesson. This one came from, I think, our 5th grade guide. So there's 1 activity, 2, 3. As you said, you can have your catechist pick which one they want to do or which 2 they'd like to do, or you can choose for them. And everybody across the classrooms are going to be doing the same ones. So whatever you'd like to do. A word about then the different activities to choose from. And I'd mentioned before that we support your catechists every step of the way. And so anytime there's content that we want you or the catechist to deliver directly, we've highlighted that pretty clearly in the directions here. So we call them explain boxes here in the office. And so the word explain is often highlighted in blue, and then there's this colored bar down the side that's really offsetting that text as this is a concept that we'd like you to explain to your students.
Okay.
The teacher, the catechist, is really our first audience for that explain box. So that's how we're supporting the catechist every step of the way, is to first kind of inform the knowledge of the catechist. You can use this exactly as we've written it, word for word, or you can use that as a foundation to put it in your own words, whatever works for you or the catechist. But feel free to use it as we've written it. It'll be accurate, or feel free to change it up, break it up, whatever works for you. Okay? There's also, particularly in the younger grades, there are opportunities here. We call them share your faith icons. And these are moments where we're suggesting it's a great opportunity for you and your catechist to pause and share a little bit about your own journey of faith in an age-appropriate way, of course. Obviously, that's one of the most powerful ways that we can evangelize and catechize our students, is to let them know that we're just as much on this journey of faith as they are, right? We might be a little bit further down the road on the journey, but we're still journeying. And our witness speaks far more than really anything that we actually say. And so it's great to really be able to pause and to share those stories of our own experiences of faith to let our students know that we're on that journey and we're journeying with them.
Okay, I like it.
The student pages and the answer keys. So every teacher's guide page, the catechist guide, includes thumbnails of the student workbook pages in the margins. So you can look at any lesson in the teacher's guide and you'll see in the margins that we have small reproductions of the student workbook pages.
Yes.
It's kind of a no-brainer, but I will say it. Those small thumbprints are not meant to be read. They're small. So those aren't the ones we're intending you to read. Those aren't really meant for you and the catechist to be able to see at a quick glance what the workbook pages are that students should be opened to and working on at any given moment. At the end of every session, however, we have given you all of the activity pages from the student workbooks reproduced in full size. And those workbook pages do include answer keys as well in the margins. So that really hasn't changed from what you were using last year, I don't think. At the end then of every session, there's a little box, a little checklist to help you get ready for the next session. So it's going to give you a few steps that you might want to start doing in advance of the next session. If you need to prepare a video or gather any sort of craft supplies or do anything in advance, it's going to tell you that in that get ready for the next session box.
Okay. And are there videos in the lessons?
Some of them, yes. Yep. So some lessons have videos. Oftentimes they're like links to like a YouTube video or some kind of outside resource. Just
we don't have televisions in all the. I think we have 2 in the entire school.
Okay. Okay. Well, you don't have to show them. Will your teachers, your catechists, have computers or their own laptops of some sort? Or
they might, and then they could just show it on that.
Right. So if there's a projector in the classrooms rather than TVs, they can pull it up on their computer or laptop. And maybe that's, where you review the sessions in advance each week and let the catechist know, if you choose activity number 2, there's a video. So you might want to bring your laptop or something like that.
Yeah, part of our problem is our classes meet in a school that no longer exists.
Oh, okay.
Years ago. So we don't have all of the technology. We don't even really get internet in the school.
Okay.
That a lot of schools have access to.
Okay.
Which is challenging.
Yeah, that does make it a challenge.
A lot of programs. So,
yeah, maybe you're just gonna have to try it out and see if it works showing the videos.
Okay.
And
if they're able to be downloaded? Like when I do a PowerPoint, I usually download a video and then it's on my computer.
Well, in a lot of cases, like I said, they're YouTube videos, so you can't just download a YouTube video. There is software out there that you can download that allows you to download YouTube videos.
Okay.
You just have to search for those, but be careful because some of those have like viruses and malware and things attached to them. Okay. I don't even know what to direct you to do that. Okay. Yeah, most of those videos they're not really downloadable unless you kind of find some workaround.
Okay.
Yeah, so you might have to skip those activities or skip the video portion of the activity or find some other substitute for that. They're not in every activity, however, so.
Okay, great.
Okay. Do you have any questions about kind of the nuts and bolts of a session, the way it's laid out in the Catechist Guide?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory, which is great.
Yeah, that's our hope. Okay, I think you get this at this point, but I'm going to emphasize this next slide or two here. And really, if this is the only thing you remember from our time together and the only thing that you actually communicate to your catechists, I'll have earned my pay today. Okay. And that's this idea behind the session plan based format and why it's unique and how it's unique. And so what that really means is how this is different than most other religious ed textbooks is instead of relying on the student textbook to deliver the majority of content through day after day of readings, the Spirit of Truth textbooks and the student workbooks and the teacher's guides work together to create a full and interactive experience for your students. So one is incomplete without the other. If the only thing that your catechist ever picks up is the student workbook, they're going to be missing half of the curriculum, right? And that is one piece of feedback that sometimes we unfortunately encounter is somebody will only have looked at their student workbook because that's what they're used to looking at in other textbook series. And they'll say, well, there's just not enough content here. And they'll leave it at that. And we just don't have the opportunity then to have said to them, if I could talk to them face to face, I would be able to point out, well, no, the rest of the content is in the teacher's guide. And so that's a really important distinction to be able to communicate to your catechists is that this curriculum, I like to use these 3 words. It's interactive, it's relational, and it's incarnational. Mm-hmm. Okay?
I can give you an example of why I know this is true.
Okay.
We had a special situation family last year, as most schools do, and the boys were on a ski team, and the person who was here before had said they could do a homeschool program.
Okay.
So they got these books, and I told the father he had to get the Catechist Guide so that he would be able, and he had to pay for it himself because it was $60.
Yes.
So that he would be able to teach the book to his boys. And he didn't. And so he wasn't able to teach that right. Material to his boys, especially he's not well catechized himself. So if he had gotten the guide, they would have all been learning well together. And
exactly.
Instead that happened.
Exactly. You absolutely, in every situation, need both.
Totally. I mean, only because I've used the program and taught it, it is mostly in the Catechist Guide.
Right, right.
I love that.
And it's important, I think, when I say that also to point out, and this is probably good to point out when you're talking with your catechists and other families or a special situation like this, that we're not expecting the catechist or the parents or whoever's using the catechist guide to always be doing direct instruction. The delivery of content occurs in a variety of different ways, but it is through the interaction and the building of relationship between the catechist and the student that that content is most frequently delivered. So every step of the way, there's some kind of interaction between the teacher, that the catechist and the teacher, they're actively involved in that learning process. And that's very different. You don't find that in most textbook series out there. Most of them, you have the students turn to page 67 and they read to page 75 and answer a few questions. And there might be a little bit of, some kind of activity that's suggested, very, very rough, kind of sketched out for the teacher or the catechist, and that's it. And so this is a different approach. And really, that's why I use the word incarnational here, because this approach actually is really meant to mimic kind of the approach that Jesus took when he would teach and when he would interact with his disciples, right? Of course, the incarnation, it's when the Son of God assumed a human nature, became man in the person of Jesus Christ, right? And in the incarnation, God drew near to us. He entered into relationship with us, and then he taught us and showed us his love by dying on the cross and rising from the dead. Now, obviously, we're not Jesus. We're not going to die on the cross and rise from the dead, but we can draw near to our students. We can journey with them. We can relate to them and do all of those things that Jesus did in the incarnation. And so this teaching is incarnational. And practically what that means is that in the teacher's guide, there's step-by-step instruction, which is absolutely necessary to the lesson. Major portions of the content delivery are found in the teacher's guide. That includes direct instruction, so moments when the catechist is asked to explain something directly. But there's also, class discussions, where the catechist just asks questions and interacts with the students in a certain sort of way. Guided reflections, all kinds of different ways that content is delivered, rather than just having students read all the time.
Right. Important.
So student workbooks, then, there are readings in the student workbook, so we don't abandon that altogether. It's important to read, but there's more than just readings. And so what you find then are hands-on activities, catechist-led applications in the student workbooks that apply, deepen, and extend the learning. And so, again, I can't emphasize enough that the catechist guide and the student workbook work together to paint a complete picture. Okay, I'm really emphasizing this, and it's probably really good for you to emphasize that with your catechist as well, so that they, really understand that concept.
Okay.
We have a whole video in the video series. There will be a whole video that emphasizes this as well, so you'll be able to direct your catechists to that video as well, and hear me explain it in much the same way I just explained it to you.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
There are differing philosophies. I know our archdiocese says they want the books sent home with the students, so they bring it home and help the family and everything. Our catechists get very frustrated by that because over half of them don't bring them back. And so if it's not, if it really goes with the catechist guide, is it important to send the books home with the kids? Or now you have parent handouts to send home, so. Sure,
and that might suffice for you.
Suffice, yeah.
That's a great question. I've never actually had that question before or contemplated that kind of direction. I know we've intentionally designed the books. They feel nice, they look beautiful, and just that kind of design choice that we've made in the student workbooks kind of intentionally gives it a sort of keepsake quality to it. So we want students to be able to keep those textbooks, to treat them nicely. So it's not a bad idea to send it home, The pages are also perforated, so maybe you don't send the whole workbook home, but you can have pages torn out if you want to send individual worksheets home for parents to look at. So there's a variety of different ways that you could work sending something home for parents to see. In particular, those take-home activities might be the best solution if you don't want them to take the textbooks home.
Okay. And the take-home activities, they're on the website?
Correct. Yep.
Oh, great.
I'll show you those in a second.
Okay.
We like to think that as we've designed the Spirit of Truth, that it's first of all built on a foundation of respect for students and trust in catechists and teachers. So what that means ultimately is that the lessons have been designed to respect students' abilities to actually learn, to be actively engaged in their learning process. And so some of the activities, there is a little bit of a higher level of rigor for some of the activities, and that's very intentional, to respect the ability of students to actually learn. More often than not, when students are challenged, they do rise to the occasion. And I think it's unfortunate that, many religious ed textbooks that have been on the market prior to this haven't fully challenged kids. And so that invites them to check out of the learning process when they're not feeling challenged. Right. We also want to trust you, the DRE, and catechists that work and volunteer for you, and teachers. You're the ones on the ground with those kids every week. And so we want to trust your creativity, your catechist creativity, your own knowledge, and your own abilities. And so we really have incorporated in the intentional design of the instruction that honor for the vocation of a DRE and a catechist and a teacher, which is where that kind of adaptability of the curriculum comes into play. So what that means in the student workbooks, readings are fewer, they're shorter, and they're more focused. So rather than just kind of endless meandering writing, they're very much focused on a particular topic when you do encounter a reading. They're always accompanied by some sort of questions to check for understanding, so that readings don't exist in a vacuum. There's always questions there to help students kind of hone in on what's important to learn from that reading. They're always supported by some kind of hands-on application, whether that's teacher-guided or something in the workbook. And you had mentioned the reading level of some of the stuff in the student guide before. It's actually, all of our readings have been scored at or slightly above grade level on multiple readability scales. So if you're familiar with the Flesch-Kincaid scale, it's a teacher thing. It's more of a school thing, but it's a readability scale where you can check to see like what grade level, it assigns a grade level that a particular reading should be able to be read at. And all of our readings have been scored at or slightly above the grade level on multiple readability scales. So what that means is your kids should be able to read these. They might be a little challenging, but that's okay. Just reinforce the fact that they can do it and support them along the way. We've also used larger font sizes and broader spacing. You mentioned the size of the second grade textbook before. That's probably the main reason for the size of particularly the second grade textbook is the intentional larger font sizes and broader spacing. And research has shown that those things promote fluency in reading. They promote reading comprehension and speed of reading as well in grades K through 2. And then you'll notice in third grade, we take a little bit smaller font size. And then in grades 4 through 8, they're kind of smaller even more. So that's intentional. We talked about the Catholic vocabulary a few minutes ago. I don't know that I need to go into this anymore with you, right? We've intentionally incorporated that vocabulary. We've also given you and the catechists the scaffolding to be able to teach that vocabulary. So words are often defined in context in real time. And again, it's just important to remember we don't expect kids to drop words like transubstantiation into everyday conversation, but it's good for them to recognize that word and have seen it before. This is kind of a no-brainer, but I'll say it anyways. Students in kindergarten, first and second grades are not necessarily meant to read essays independently, okay? So there are readings in, say, the first grade text. That doesn't mean we're asking a first grader to read all of those by themselves. It's probably a good teaching strategy to have catechists read aloud to their students, particularly in those younger grades, or do a section where they read and then have a student read a small portion, and then they read and have a student read a small portion. So kind of a sort of call and response, back and forth sort of thing. Have students read along with them. So just keep that in mind. Students are not necessarily meant to read independently in those younger grades.
Okay.
The textbook design, we've incorporated intentionally clean and uncluttered pages that promotes knowledge retention. It encourages focus. So there's not like brightly colored boxes popping up in the corners of the pages for no reason, and different things to distract students. We really want them to focus on the activity and the content at hand.
It's very pleasant and calming.
It is, right? Very much so.
Yeah.
Very intentional.
Overwhelming. And if they seem overwhelming to an adult, they probably seem more overwhelming to a child.
Oh yeah. I flip through some of these other textbooks. I'm like, I don't even know where to look on the page. The sacred art that we've selected has also been intentionally chosen to capture students' attention, to focus students on what they're learning, or to introduce or illustrate a theme. So all of these things were very intentionally designed for these purposes. A few words about the adaptability, and I think you've got a pretty good grasp of this at this point. But everything was written to be adaptable, so feel free to spend a whole class on a single warm-up, and you can encourage your catechists to do this as well, particularly with the sacred art warm-ups. And as we were saying before, if the conversation is going really, really well, don't stop it.
Right.
Sometimes we think, as teachers and as catechists, like we've got a whole lesson planned, we need to race to get through it all because we planned it. When really, if good quality learning is occurring and students are actively engaged in it, just go with that moment and forget the rest of the lesson plan.
And that's what happened on that one day.
Yep.
And I feel like they learned more that day than any other day because
absolutely.
Right? We were getting into and they were all fully present.
Right. They love it. They eat it up. So encourage your catechists to go with that if they feel that it's being fruitful and positive learning is occurring, and to not be afraid to not complete everything. You can extend an activity over 2 days. So if if good quality learning is occurring and you kind of artificially extended a particular activity, don't be afraid to pick it up next week to kind of wrap it up. You can mix and match parts of sessions. So if you particularly like a warm-up from one day but didn't like any of the activities, feel free to take that warm-up and connect it to the activities from the next week if they match well. Okay. You can teach sessions out of order. So if you have I don't know exactly what your standards are for religious ed in your diocese, or maybe your parish has some kind of standards or curriculum, and our sessions are a little bit out of order, feel free to roll the dice differently, I guess. The rule of thumb, always quality versus quantity. That's a really important kind of virtue to drive home for your catechists here, is quality versus quantity of learning. I think this is important. These are all some teaching tips to encourage your catechists here, that they can feel free to adapt group activities to be done individually, or vice versa, to adapt individual activities for group work. So, you might have a particular group that does really well working in groups, but just kind of you hear crickets when they work by themselves. So mix it up, change an individual activity into a group activity. You can do the same thing with readings. Instead of asking students to read by themselves, feel free to adapt those to be done as a whole group, or read aloud to your students, or have students read in pairs or small groups. Or some combination of all of the above. You can mix and match those kind of reading activities. Turn written activities into class discussions. That's one of my favorite teaching tips. When I was a teacher, I almost always would turn written activities into some kind of a discussion instead. For me as a teacher at that time, it meant that I had less to read at the end of the day. But I also found that the conversations that we had together were more fruitful than what they would have written. So that's a great strategy. This last bullet point on here, I think is important. Feel free to swap out sacred art images for ones that you like better. We've selected art that we've, particularly in the lessons that have an activity connected to the artwork, we've selected that artwork and written the activity around it. But you might not like the artwork we chose. So feel free to jump on Google Images and find something you like better. And you can use the questions that we gave you kind of to get the ball rolling on a conversation, or you can use your own questions. I found some of the most fruitful sacred art activities I ever did with my students was simply to just put a picture up on the screen and ask them, what do you see? Mm-hmm. Right? And that was enough to get the conversation started. So feel free to swap out. You're not locked into using what we've selected for you. It sounds like you're familiar with the sacramental prep, because that's what you used second grade for last year, was sacramental prep. So you can know or be sure that stuff is still in the second grade guide. So there is special units for preparing for sacraments of reconciliation and Holy Communion in grade 2. We do also offer a separate guide for preparing for confirmation in 2nd or 3rd grade if you do something of a restored order, but I don't think
no, we're 8th grade.
Okay. Yeah. So we also do actually offer a guide that's probably more targeted towards middle school, if that's something you're interested in for a separate purchase. It's called Sealed in Fire. Okay. That's a whole separate thing. If you're interested in taking a look, we can certainly talk about that at another time.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have quite a few actually this year for the first time of like 11 and 12-year-olds who are not baptized yet.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you have RCIC?
We don't. We don't have anything like that yet. That may be something we come up with down the line. I think we've been asked if we have that before, so maybe that's something that would be worth us.
I think it would be good. I mean, I used, I only had 2 boys last year. They were in the same family, and I used the 7 sacraments.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
And we had like a 2-hour meeting, the whole family, and we did baptism, and I did all the activities in there.
That's great.
It went really well.
Well, you might find, so if you're talking 10 or 11 years old, you might find that the 5th grade guide, which all of 5th grade is focused on the sacraments.
Oh, okay.
So there's a whole unit on each sacrament with a number of sessions per sacrament. So you might be able to just turn to, the baptism baptism unit in that grade and just use those 3 or 4 sessions. I forget exactly how many, and use those. That could work for you. And it goes through everything from like the history of the sacrament and salvation history. So it's scriptural roots to the matter and form and how to receive the sacrament and everything in between.
Okay. So
I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And they're very good lessons because I wrote most of that guide myself. So.
Okay.
Okay, let's take a look at our online resources. So what you'll find on our website, and this is the website, so bookmark this, SophiaInstituteForTeachers.org/Spirit of Truth Parish Supplements. It's kind of a mouthful, so just go to it once and bookmark it.
Of Truth.
Parish Supplements. Lots of good stuff on this website, and I'll show you them live here in a second, but you'll find a collection of take-home activities. So anytime in the guides where it asks you to send home one of these take-home activities, you'll find them there for free download. There's mini lessons to help supplement and teach the liturgical year. So we do put some lessons on there for Advent and for Lent. There's a collection of saint cards. I think you mentioned those before. Some lessons will ask students to read about, choose a saint and read about their life or their story. And so we've given you a collection of those to kind of get the ball rolling. Okay. You'll find a sacred art library, links to our Sophia Sketchpad videos, which maybe you've seen those before, but you can get them nice and easily in one place through the website. Our further e-lessons, so every month we put out a free lesson to teach about the Sunday Gospels for the month. And we also do once a month a Teaching the Faith with Current Events lesson, which teaches about something going on in the world around us that kids might be paying attention to and kind of gives you the ability to talk to them about that. So those are all optional, but they're all free. We also have video links. I know we talked about the videos before. If you do get that able to work in your setting, We do have all of the videos with links that you can just click on to pull up all of the videos automatically. So you don't have to type in the URLs. And then there's other catechist resources. So what that is in the catechist guide, there are some handouts or worksheets that we put in the catechist guide that are not in the student workbook. So they're things that we would suggest you photocopy maybe or do, cut out in advance. All of those resources are available to download and print also on the website rather than photocopying from the catechist.
And that would be in the catechist guide.
Correct. It's in both places.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump out of this and just show you the website live here.
Okay.
Give me 1 second to share my screen. And here we go. Are you able to see that? Spirit of Truth Parish Edition supplements?
Yes.
Okay. This is brand new, like I said, as of about 3 days ago. It's pretty slick looking, I think. I like the way it turned out. There's a link here to all of those video orientation videos that I told you about at the beginning. You can just click on the link and it'll take you right to them. As I said, there's 4 videos currently available. We'll be adding more as I get them available. Here's where you get those take-home activities. So you click on the link and we have all of the take-home activities separated out by grade and by individual session numbers so you can easily locate them. I'll just click on one and show you what it looks like.
So they're just a couple per grade.
Right, yeah.
Each week. Okay.
There's not necessarily one for every single session. It depends on the activity or the session.
Okay.
So this is what one looks like. I think it's asking students to do something of a nature walk outside of class and kind of record some of the things that they find as they go on the nature walk. Here's the Saint cards. I'll show you what these look like real quickly. It's a PDF download. It's free. There's a table of contents at the beginning so you can see all of the saints that we have bios for, and they all look something like this. So there's a picture of the saint and just kind of a mini biography. These are probably a little bit more appropriate for maybe like 4th grade on in terms of reading level, I would say. But you can use them in the younger grades and have a catechist read them aloud, whatever the case might be. Here are the links to the external videos. As I was saying, you can just click directly on the link. So it tells you what session, and then it gives you the link for the video. You can just click directly on that instead of having to type in the URL. Here's the other catechist resources that we were just talking about. So these are ones, they're in the catechist guide that you might have to photocopy in some way, but you can just download them here and print them out instead if that's easier. Oh, I mentioned this before. Let me show you this, the customized programs. So what we've given you for each grade here is a list of sessions that we suggest if you don't do 33 sessions in a year. You said you do 24?
Yeah.
So there's actually a line here for every grade level. If you do 24 sessions, we would recommend you do these sessions right here.
Okay, got it.
And for each grade level. So that should help you kind of focus on which ones to do.
Right.
Again, feel free to swap out. So if we suggested you do one and you'd rather do another, feel free to swap that out. But we've at least got you down the road there to start thinking about that.
Okay.
We're always adding things to our website, so feel free to please actually check back often and see what we've added. And if there's something that you need or you want that you feel like we haven't provided to you, let me know, and if it's within our power to do, we'll try to get it done and add it to the website when we're able to.
Okay, great.
That's pretty much everything. I know that was a lot of information. Do you have any questions for me at this point?
When are the books being printed?
When are the books being printed?
Yeah, I think they're being printed any day, right? To be sent to us. Parish edition.
So wait, I thought you already received all of your books.
We did not.
Oh, you did? Okay.
We didn't.
Okay. All right. You just have the preview copy is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay. Okay, I misunderstood. I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I don't know exactly when they're going to be sent to you. I think they're off at our printers right now, so they should be coming very soon.
Okay.
I will double check on that and see if I can get you an exact date.
Okay.
Right now.
Do you have any parents think letters that we send home, or something that helps the parents?
Yes, we're actually in the middle of creating those right now. So,
great. Okay.
and we're doing it on sort of a rolling basis. So we're kind of doing like the first session for the first unit. I think we're doing parent letters home for every unit. And we're doing like the first unit in each grade level, and then we'll go back into the second unit and so forth, so that they're available as you go.
Oh, great. And but you're creating them right now.
Yeah, we're in the process of writing them. I'm not 100% sure which ones are finished, but when they're ready, those will also show up on our website.
On the same website.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's it. I think I've been to 3 workshops and and I've tested it out, so I feel like I have a handle on it, and I love it. So
awesome. Glad to hear it.
Thank you for creating it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for using it.
You're welcome.
Well, okay. Like I said at the beginning, we don't want this to be the end of our relationship with each other. So please don't be a stranger. Shoot me an email. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything that you want to share with me, don't be shy. Just drop me a line, okay? I again would like to hear success stories as well. So if good things are happening, let me know about those too. Keep an eye on our website because, like I said, we update it frequently. We also plan on being in touch. So without being oppressive, we may send you out like newsletters with some important information, or keep an eye on your email for themed webinars that we host over the course of the year that you can sign up for free, just to kind of enhance what's going on in your parish.
Right. And can the catechist sign up for that as well?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. I will check on those things that you asked for, particularly a delivery date, and I'll have either I'll have somebody else shoot you an email with something a little bit more specific on that. Okay?
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. God bless. Have a great school year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.